Hello, Charlie TCG here, and happy Paldea Evolved Release Day. It's really exciting we can finally break down and tell you exactly what my top picks are for the format right now. It's a very explosive, incredibly impactful format, and as you've been seeing as I've covered over the channel last couple months, I've been talking about how it's been performing well in Japan, the decks you should be looking out for, and I'm going to break down to you my top 5 picks, whether you're going to a League Cup when it's legal, or potentially NAIC. So I thought I'd break in to see exactly what my top 5 pick is. Now it's in fact Chien-Pao. My most hyped deck going into this, if you really love like Blastoise Keldeo back in like 2014 era, this is pretty much exactly like that. The amazing Trembling Frost ability where you can get 2 basic energies when it's in the active spot and pop them into your hand is really good because they could team up with Excalibur, do huge amount of damage with Hail Blade, doing 60 times the amount of water energy you discard from all your Pokemon in play. Has done pretty okay. It's on the regionals and championships that's happened over in Japan and rest of Asia. It in fact got a top 4 and a top 8 placement in Taiwan just a couple of weekends ago, which is really exciting. And the City League is doing pretty all right. Getting a couple of wins, few second places, top 4 and top 8 is really nothing to be shy about. Yes, it does have a bit of some glaring weaknesses by being constantly reliant on abilities, but I think Chien-Pao really can hold its own to be one of those really strong sort of Pokemon, and I think definitely in a better position where Miraidon was going into the format. So this is kind of the list I've been working with, and I hope you kind of can see this is exactly what you should be thinking about going into Chien-Pao. Having 2 copies of them with a 2/2 line of Palkia is really, really strong. Palkia, I believe, is one of the strongest partners for Chien-Pao as of right now, as it has the amazing subswell attack to do 60 plus the amount of more Pokemon you have in both bench Pokemon, both your opponent and yourself, and the ability to do Star Portal to attach more energies out and play is an amazing star power for this deck to kind of hold with. Having the 3/3 line of Excalibur is really needed because you have Irida, you can easily search out for Excalibur and Rare Candy, making this a no-brainer to have sort of these options around there. And with the return of Superior Energy Retrieval, guaranteed an easier way to get some of the water energies from your discard pile because you're constantly discarding that through Hail Blade. I really love this sort of deck. There's definitely a lot of room to improvement, but if you want to have an idea to see exactly what Chien-Pao could look like, this is a really good sort of example about it. And having a high count of Iona is really, really strong as well, because you can kind of like disrupt the opponent, really try and limit their hand size if you're kind of a bit behind, and kind of come back through there. And the capability of Lumineon, being able to attack with it through Excalibur, you can constantly be recycling them. Yes, there are a few tech options you could go with. Starmie, Suicune, and even the Kyogre are really good options potentially included in this sort of deck as other attackers. But as of right now, this is the list I've been really happy with so far. My number 4 pick is actually Mew VMAX. And although it hasn't done particularly well overall in the big tournaments, only getting a top 8, it's done really well in the City League, kind of like solidifying itself to be a tier 2 to tier 3 archetype, which I really like to see it. It didn't really gain, as I covered last week, a lot of new cards in there, pretty much only really Iona, but I think Mew VMAX is in a really good situation right now. The ability to do any of your bench Pokemon, which is a Fusion Strike with Cross Fusion Strike, is really, really powerful. And the huge rise of the increase of Spiritomb as well as other sort of ability locking sort of cards, the release of kind of going back to more Fusion Strike build with having Meloetta as another attacker is really good because those Fusion Strike energies on Genesect means you can constantly be using those attacks. This is sort of a rough list I've kind of come up with, and one which you should really start to consider if you really like Mew, want to kind of see exactly how it's going to play around with it. As you can see here, you're still playing a bit more of the paths of options, but going around having Crystal Cave to help you win your Lost Zones or matchup, and Lost City as well, and Path to Peak. Still trying to be very disruptive in some sort of ways, but as you're a Fusion Strike build, you have to sacrifice the path path judge sort of deck, kind of focusing more on the capability of constantly be streaming your attackers through Meloetta by using more Elsa Sparkle and having a higher count of Forest Steel Stone, so you'll constantly be gaining all that big setup to potentially do those big turn 1 big one-hit KOs. Echoing Horn, multiple switching options, and Palpad are really good tech options for Mew. I really love this sort of deck, and still having the capability of having Iona to be disrupted near the end game and recycling that with Palpad to draw in with Genesect is really, really good. This build is kind of to go around more like Ting Lu, as I talked about on Wednesday. I think that's definitely in a really good position in the format as of right now. But I think this is definitely if you really love Mew, you really want to carry on playing it, I think this Fusion build is definitely a bit stronger as of right now to Path to Peak purely based on how potentially Ability Lock could become a lot stronger. My number 3 pick is actually Giratina. This Pokemon has had a lot of love carrying into the format right now, and I've kind of teamed up together with Lost Zone and Arceus. It in fact actually won the Hong Kong Championships just past weekend, which is really good to see, and just get a couple top 8, loaded top 8 placements and a top 4 deck as well. Kind of a teaming up between the Lost Zone and Arceus build, but potentially the Arceus build could be a lot more stronger. And I've combined the City League here, and you can see it's definitely the most dominant sort of format. it really does super well in a best of one sort of format. The capability of the huge loss impact sort of damage and Star Requiem with a couple of fun little techs as well, like Spiritomb as well as Iona. I think Giratina is an incredibly good sort of spot. Because with the Lost Zone option, you have Jet Energy, sorry. So you can constantly be reusing your Comfy to easily get the Pokemon to retreat and boost to the active spot. And when you have the Arceus build, you have more destructive capability with a higher count of potentially Iona as well as Spiritomb, which I really like here. I think Giratina, even though it hasn't had that much hype in our sort of format in the last couple tournaments, I think Giratina could potentially do really well. A build which I think could be really strong, especially, is the Arceus Giratina Flying Pikachu. Basic Pokemon are very popular as of right now. Lost Zone, as I covered a couple days ago in my looking ahead video, you can see here that Lost Zone did incredibly well, dominating a top 8 sort of placement, and it ended up being an Arceus Giratina Flying Pikachu that ended up taking on the crown. We can see here the only really new cards it does gain is Spiritomb as well as Iona, but those are really impactful sort of cards. Spiritomb to slow down potentially Genesect if they're playing the in Mew, if they're just playing the path build, but you can have the Spiritomb is really good to shut down Lumineon and other sort of very impactful basic V Pokemon. The rest of it is very sort of simple. You're kind of focusing more on getting as many of the Pokemon out as possible with your item cards, and the supporters you want to be disruptive. A higher count of Judge is really more important because Iona is very good late game with this sort of deck, whereas with Judge, you will like that early game because you want to limit them as quickly as possible while you're setting up with your Arceus because you play a high count of them, so you can always constantly try and get that Star Birth out. Cleansing Gloves is really good in this sort of deck. It lets the ability for Giratina to one-hit KO Mew VMAX as well as Gardevior EX when they have no damage on it. I really like that capability which Giratina has to offer because it is still very strong because it does play Choice Spell, but you want to get those big one-hit KOs when it really can't afford to get it. This is definitely potentially the more stronger build of Arceus Giratina, which we'll probably see around a lot more. But there is, of course, the Lost Zone version, which I love. I think the Lost Zone version is definitely one of my favorite here. And you can see its only new card it did add was, in fact, 2 Ionas. Kind of like going away from the 2 Roxanne, going up with 2 Ionas is kind of like pretty good sort of transition. There are a couple of things that you do like about this. With the Super Rod, you'll constantly have the ability to reuse some of your attackers and not relying too much on Clara to guarantee get your Sableye or Cramorant, or potentially your Greninja or Manaphy if they get rid of it. Shuffling it back in with Super Rod and getting it back out with Nest Ball is a really good combination. Guarantees you can use your supporter like Boss's Orders and Iona as a more destructive sort of capability on your opponent. Yes, you do sacrifice some of your energy counts by having a limited amount of Psychic and Water and Grass from what you're used to, but you do get Jet Energy as an additional switching option, which I really love about this with Giratina, and it uses to get any of these one of your basic Pokemon can immediately retreat while after jetting them, like boosting and jetting them into the active spot, and I really love that, especially about this sort of deck. Now, my number 2 spot, in fact, goes to Lugia VStar. Yes, it may not have performed as well in the regional championships, but the City League, it is absolutely dominated. Definitely focusing more on the colorless sort of build, really overthrowing the capability of what we've seen with the Single Strike version. Single Strike is definitely the more strongest archetype as of right now. The huge capability of doing these big one-hit KOs with Tyranitar by constantly loading up them with the Single Strike energy when it gets knocked out, then recycling them back in with Owner Vitality. But going more of the color sort of build here, we're kind of going more of the 2-shot with Snorlax as well as those big one-hit KOs with Weirdeer later on by flooding the board with energy and attaching a Jet Energy to a Weirdeer, boosting it to the active place, moving all the energy to it, and doing those big 300 plus sort of damage attacks with it. You can see here in the City League, it's absolutely dominated by doing quite well in its wins and second place as well as multiple top 4s and top 8 positions. And if you want to know what build sort of looks like, this is exactly the one you should be thinking about. Definitely, as you can see here, the item cards are more focusing purely on getting as many of your Pokemon out as much as possible. Because we're seeing likes of Gardevoir and Lugia doing such great success, Path to the Peak is definitely kind of going up there, being more popular as a really good tech option, as you even saw that with the Lost Zone sort of Giratina build. So Pump Kaboot and Lost Vacuum is definitely a necessary choice in this. If you're really scared about an option, you could potentially add likes of Avery if you're really worried about it. But the attackers here, you can see we played the Luxray, which I absolutely love, the Vibrant Flash, and you might go like this, Charlie, you're only playing one stage 2. Have we got like an Archie's Ace in the hole, Maxie's in the Bull Tree? No, the amazing Vibrant Flash sort of ability means if you're behind in prizes, you can immediately put it straight down onto the bench. Viewing this as an incredible attack that works reversal energy if you're behind in prizes, it is 3 colors energies, so Luxray can immediately have these big one-hit KOs potentially on Lugia VMAXs or any sort of flying Pikachus out there, and I absolutely love that sort of capability it has in Lugia. Recycling with Snorlax is really good as another attacker, and it's that you're mainly going to go with Lugia to kind of like soften sort of the blow, get some finishing off attacks with Archeops and potentially Snorlax, and a big finisher with Lugia Weirdir V. The energies here, we do play the Jet Energy to constantly be as a really good to make sure Pokemon don't get stuck in the active spot, get that extra damage in with Weirdir, and potentially that easy good retreat option. And Therapy Energy, so Snorlax now doesn't fall asleep. I really like that sort of capability that Lugia is really dominating itself in definitely the city leagues, not doing as well in the big sort of tournaments for happening over in Japan and the rest of Asia, but I know that the rest of the world, we love Lugia. It could potentially, we could see a new lease of life, but if you really want to try out this new Lugia sort of build, this is definitely one I would recommend, and only a couple new cards in there with the Luxray, the Energies, as well as Iona. And no surprise at all, I think my number one pick is in fact Gardevoir EX. And we can just see on the side here, it has won 2 out of the 3 big tournaments as have happened right now in the Paldea Evolved format in Japan and the rest of Asia. Got 2 second places, a top 4 and a top 8, absolutely dominating the meta on these huge tournaments. While the City League here, you can see how well it's performed with its multiple wins, second place, and huge amounts in top 8 and top 4. Psychic Embrace became absolutely more powerful because it gained a new sort of card, Reversal Energy, meaning that your baby Gardevoir can do these more big damage out there. Instead of attaching for 1 energy is only 30 damage, you're now attaching, do 90 more damage if you're behind in prizes. And if you want to see, this is pretty much the list that I've been working on and kind of doing really well because this was the one that in fact won the big tournament happened over in Japan. You may notice a big thing. There is no what's it called? Champions Festival here. Why is that? Well, it's a $1,000 card in Japan. That's why people aren't playing it over here. Potentially over here, we could see more of an increase in Champions Festival, pure on the basis that it's much cheaper, easier to get hold of, and you can play multiple different languages in it. Whereas we've seen a more strong capability of Collapse Stadium, as where Temple of Sinnoh, there's really good options here to really kind of get rid of your damage of Zacians or Gardevoir EXs so your opponent doesn't get any more prizes. And Temple of Sinnoh, well, if the second most popular deck is Lugia and Jet Energy is nearly a lot of decks that the switching option, it's really good to shut those off. The rest of it is very sort of simple what we're seeing here. The couple new cards here, you're seeing the big 4 copies of Iona. Gardevoir is potentially going to be 1 to 2 prizes behind before it really gets that set up. So punishing your opponent in the later game is really, really detrimental to your game sort of plan. And Super is really good because all of a sudden Shining Arcana can get you some of any of your Psychic Energies and attach them to your Pokemon. If your Gardevoir goes down, you can shuffle in your Pokemon again, like Gardevoir, like Cresselia, or your Zacian V. All of a sudden, your 1 copy of Zacian V now becomes a 3 copy if you're constantly recycling it through Super Rod and Reversal Energy. Potentially between 1 and 2, you could go down to 10 Psychic and 2 Reversal Energies. You don't really want to play more than 1 or 2 because it's only really going to be used at least once or twice in the game, as you only have Gardevoir, the baby one, as your big sort of attacker in the option in the game. With the huge increase of Radiant Greninja, you want to play your Manaphy's out there, and most of it here is absolutely really flawless. 100% recommend this Gardevoir list here. If you're not playing Champions Festival, you can see here it still works with it. I think Gardevoir is in such a good position in the meta as of right now. And I want to finish up by talking about the other Gardevoir, which I absolutely love. It's more the comeback mechanic of Gardevoir EX, focusing more on Mewtwo V Union and Reversal Energy to really get the game sort of going. Having a higher count of Reversal Energy gives you option to more other really cool Stage 2 Pokemon. Both of the Galets as well, as you've seen, Arceus is pretty popular right now, as well as the likes of Miraidon is kind of still going out there, still doing pretty well, but mainly because of Arceus. You can escalate to easily get those 2 prizes throughout the game, and that Luxray as well. Again, putting it straight down on the bench. If you're behind in prizes, attach Reversal Energy. All of a sudden, you've KO'd a Lugia VStar, or potentially a Flying Pikachu, which may be causing problem, or just laying there on the bench. Mewtwo V Union is really good, especially in the Mirror Match and Lost Zone. So decks being able to flood the board state with energies, getting that extra healing and even that energy acceleration onto it if you get your Gardevoir knocked out very early on. Because we play multiple different one-offs, you play a higher count of Super Rod, because getting those Super Rods as well is really handy. Constantly be recycling any of your sort of really good Stage 2 cards, or potentially your Stage 1, like your Curliers and like your potential Rolts as well, to constantly be reusing it. And we're focusing a lot more on not really getting damage, hence the higher count of Manaphy. I think this list is absolutely incredible, and multiple new sort of cards in there with a Luxray, Reversal Energy, Super Rod, Iona, as well as the return of Azor Town. Kind of a really good sort of a capability to constantly be reusing any of your basic Pokemon and put them straight onto the bench if they don't have a rule box. Definitely, this is the deck to really look out for if you're playing Gardevoir or want to have a challenge in there, because this is a lot more capability to change with Gardevoir sort of plan. So that is my top 5 big competitive decks in the format right now. Hope you've enjoyed this video. Let me know, is there a deck I missed or a deck that you want to talk about and think about? Comment down below in the description. My name is TCG. I hope you've enjoyed this video, and happy Paldea Evolved format. Be sure to like and subscribe if you're new, and I'll see you in a couple of days' time for another video. See you this soon. Bye-bye.